And I'm a grateful believer in Jesus and long-term recovery. But the state of Tennessee is really working hard to pull together. We see anyone who has struggled with addiction knows that the state and the court system and all that, they're really missing the mark on trying to help us to get better and figure out a different way of life. I think the state is finally seeing that incarceration is not the way into helping people through addiction into a different life. So they are working hard to bring the faith communities together to show that the church can be a huge part of the solution. And in my opinion, the church is the solution. And again, my name is Cynthia, a grateful believer in Jesus, and now they say I'm good to go. So, I'm really, really glad to be here, and I want to start by sharing my story. It is 100% a God story. It is how God has completely transformed my life from 20 plus years of addiction to where I'm at today as a recovery minister in a recovery minister in a recovery church. God has shown me a life that I could have never imagined for myself. But I grew up in a little town called Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. I don't know if any of y'all know where Mount Pleasant, Tennessee is, but that's where I grew up. I grew up on Dry Creek Road in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, and I had a good family, and I had a brother who was good to me, parents who were good to me, and just a regular life as a child. At about 14 or 15, as a lot of us do, I started making some questionable choices. I started drinking. I started using drugs, probably a little bit more heavy than your person. But to me, I was just doing what everybody else did. I was just being a regular teenager, a regular youth. I was just, being young, and that's what young people do. But I had no idea that those choices that I was making at 14, 15, 16 years old were going to affect the next 20 years of my life. But that is exactly what happened. All through high school, I did graduate high school by some miracle. I like to say I think they just kind of felt sorry for me and gave me a diploma because I didn't go very often. And probably by the time I was about 19 years old, I was a full-blown addict. I spent most all of my time in a bar in Nashville, and I had, my drug use had graduated up to, I just really didn't care. I wasn't afraid of anything. And as I look back at my life, I like it when my kids have a little healthy fear. Healthy fear is good for us because I didn't have much, and it really held me back on my decision making. At 19, my life I didn't realize what was going on. I didn't realize I was an addict. I didn't really know what an addict was. I was just doing what everybody I hung out with did. So it wasn't really different what I was doing than what everybody else around me was doing. So I was in the norm for the people that I was with. I didn't realize that we weren't the norm. So I continued on in that path. I would work, I wouldn't work, until I was about 25. That's 5 years just burnt. Nothing accomplished, nothing gained. And let me go back to say, I grew up in a little church in Mount Pleasant called First United Methodist Church in Mount Pleasant. We went on holidays, and I went when I was little. We'd go to Sunday school, and I loved God, and I believed very strongly in the Lord. I did, but I did not have a relationship, as someone here just said just moments ago. I did not have a relationship. So my life, at 25, something major happened, and that was I got pregnant. So at 25, I got pregnant, and I said, all right, this is it. This is going, it's time to slow down, chill out, get it together, have a regular life, just a normal life. And so that was my plan. I went through my pregnancy. I pretty much quit using. We'll put that in quotation marks. And I just was, I had a plan. I was going to be a mom. I didn't want to get married to this individual, but I felt like this was a God moment for me to say, whew, here's your chance to get it together. So I had my son. His name's Dylan, and everything was good. And I continued on that doing well path for almost a year, I'll say. For almost a year, I had my life under semi-control. I was working. I was really getting it together a little bit, making a little bit of momentum. But then when he didn't need me quite as much, I would start taking him to my mom's, and I went back to that bar that I said I spent a lot of time in Nashville. I just started going back up there. And, before I knew it, I would leave him with my mom, and I would go back up there, and I wouldn't come home for 2 days, and I knew he was fine. My mom had him, so it's fine, he's taken care of, and I'm still young, I'm still giving myself lots of grace, and, that it's okay. So it didn't take long. As many of you know, when you get back out there, it didn't take long for me to be worse than I was before and just a mess again. And spending all my time there. My son was with my mom most all the time. And then, here we go. These time frames go quick. So then I've got 5 more years that go by. And in that next 5 years, I met a guy. I met a man at that bar. And I didn't think anything was ever going to come from that place. But you will hear in my story later, this guy has stuck through this. So I met a guy. He was an alcoholic and an addict, just like myself. And we just kind of clung together. He needed somebody, and I was at a point in my life where I was looking for anything stable. I was looking for anything to save me from myself, and I didn't even really realize it. So when we met, within 6 months, I was having another baby. So and then I said the same thing to myself as I said the first time. This is my chance. Okay, we're going to get married. We're going to have a baby. I'm going to get my life straight. We're going to live a good life. I had an example to look at. My mom and dad they're still married. They're just like, what are you doing with your life? They would try to talk to me, but they were in denial. They didn't want to know that there was a real problem. They drank, and they thought, well, she must just drink too much. It was so much more than that in my addiction. And so I was pregnant again, and had my second son, and got married. So he told me he was never coming to Columbia, Tennessee, or Mount Pleasant, or any of those places, his country places, because he was a New Yorker and he was never going to be a country person. Yes, exactly. So, but that was not the case. After, right before I had our son, we moved to Culleoka, where my parents were living, which was the countryest country in the world. I got some ladies that know where I'm talking about. Country, it's near here too. It's near here. So, we had our son, and we loved each other, and we had no idea how to live. He had been an alcoholic and an addict his whole life. I had been an addict my whole adult life, and we just didn't have a clue, ladies, on how to do anything. We didn't. So we just kept on in our same path. Of course, like I said I was going to get it together, remember, through that pregnancy. So I did okay for a little bit, but it probably wasn't 2 or 3 months after TJ was born that I was back just the way we were before. And so there we were, 2 kids, hot mess of a life. He would work some, I didn't work. It was just a very hopeless situation. It was very, very hopeless. And we didn't know where to turn to find hope at all. And so this is getting a little repetitious in this story. So then I got pregnant again. We had been, that was there's 5 years between all three of my children. So 5 more years of not accomplishing or doing anything other than seeping deeper into addiction. Now, I don't want to minimalize the fact that, you start here and you say, I'll never do this, that, or this. And then in that 5-10 years, you're doing everything that you said you wouldn't do. And you have become the person that you used to sit around and talk about and think was terrible. And, it just was addiction is a progressive disease. And that is exactly what mine did. So I don't ever like to give any of the drugs any glory in using them, saying them by name, but I think that there's a part of my story where it becomes necessary for you to understand the intensity. And when my third pregnancy, I was pregnant with a little girl. It's awesome. We're like, yay, we're gonna have a little girl. And, I'm hoping that, I said before, I don't think I even had hope this time that anything was gonna be any different. I had lost even the desire to say, life will be different. I'm gonna do things differently. I just thought, this is my life and this is what my life's gonna be. We're gonna be alcoholics and drug addicts and we're just gonna survive. And that's pretty much where we were at. So I had my little girl, and we lived in a trailer back behind my parents' house in Culleoka. And after she was only probably not even a month old yet, a girlfriend came to my house and she said, come on, you need to get out. You need to get out of here. Let's go somewhere. So she took me to someone's house and they were cooking methamphetamine. So, when I say I was fearless, everything that I should have thought, like, oh my gosh, this is scary, get me out of here, this is awful, none of those thoughts crossed my mind. I went around and I went with this person and they did this, and this, and then boom, they had all these drugs. And only thing my mind thought was, I want to do that. I can do that. I'm going to figure that out. And that became my life goal. And for about the next 6 or 8 months, that's what I tried to figure out. And then for the next year of my life, that's all I did. It consumed me. It consumed my life. It consumed my husband, who our life had become something that was pitiful and scary, and we were terrible parents. At that time, I had a 12-year-old son, a 6-year-old son, and then my little girl was, it was through her first year of her life. So we had completely lost any sense of morality, reality, hope, anything. And on November the 25th of 2009, a beautifully tragic thing happened, and that was the cops kicked in my door. My husband was already in jail. He had went to jail November the 6th, and this was November the 25th. So the cops kicked in my door, and they woke my kids up and took them over to my parents' house, and I went to jail, which was exactly where I needed to be. It was, I have thanked every officer that was involved. That's why I say it was a beautifully tragic thing. So they took my kids to the hospital to have them drug tested and all of this. And this is the hardest part of my story to share for me most days is I thought, there's no way those kids have drugs in their system. Oh my gosh, there's no way. Well, my little 14-month-old baby had traces of meth in her system when I was arrested. And it was an incredibly wake-up call. I mean, I was somebody who used to always say, I'm not hurting anybody but myself. I'm only hurting myself. leave me alone. People give you advice, all this. So I'm there. I'm only hurting myself. Y'all leave me alone. I'm taking care of my kids. For some reason, that drug had me lying to myself. I thought I was super mom. I thought I was up in the morning making waffles and this, and I thought I was doing something when my poor son would say, "Did you go to sleep last night, Mama? I got up to use the bathroom at 3:30, and you and 10 more people were in the living room." Our life was it was a very sad situation, but I went to jail, and that was awesome. It was right where I needed to be. Just talk about the incarceration thing. Yes, we can incarcerate people out of addiction, but when you find what you need while you're there, it can change your life. And that's what happened for me. I grew up in church, like I said, so when I went to jail and that put me in a cell by myself, because I'm sure they figured I was going to be detoxing and all of that, I got on my knees and I prayed that God would walk me through the mess that I had created out of my life. That he would just walk me through it and show me what it meant to be a Christian. Because I had always I believed in God. I felt like I was a Christian, but I knew then in that moment of clarity that I had that I needed to know more. I needed to figure it out, what it really meant. And so that took work on my part. And I dedicated that time, and I didn't know how much time it was going to be. It could have been 8 years. To reading the Bible. So I just started reading the Bible, and I started praying continuously for God to reveal himself to me, to show me what I needed to do, to help me. And I'm telling you, prayers get answered. God hears our prayers. And when we surrender, I surrendered my life to him. When I said, Lord, just show me what it means. I give my life to you. I give my life to you. And in that moment, I felt peace. I didn't know if I was going to prison. I didn't know if I was going to, how long I was going to be in jail. But I had peace that whatever it was, God was going to use me because I had given my life to him. And I knew that God was in that time with me and revealed so much to me as I would read scriptures at night. During the day, at night when I laid down, the Lord would apply them to my life. I would understand what those words meant to me today, to me on those days. And it was an amazing time. I mean, you say I stayed incarcerated in Murray County Jail for 9 months, and there was no TV, no radio, no commissary. It was you and a cell, and that was it. And I was locked down all the time because I was a felon. And it was, I wouldn't trade anything in the world for that time, because it was a time of solitude where I got to know my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and my life was transformed. I said my husband was also in jail, so I'm writing him letters, and he's thinking, what in the world? I think my mom thought I joined a cult. I think my husband thought she is crazy, but he wanted his family more than anything else. He wanted his family. Yeah, I mean, because, my parents went to church, but I'm just like, God is changed. Everything's going to be great. Our life is going to be so good, and no matter what. And they're just like, oh my gosh, you're a felon. You're none of that was even on my radar, because I knew that God was at work, and that now my life was I was finally going to have a life, because I hadn't even had a life before. I wasn't living before. I was existing, and thank the Lord that I was protected from hurting myself or my children any more than I did, because I definitely hurt them emotionally and could have been much, much worse. But the Lord was with me and with us. And so my husband was like, okay, whatever you say, we're going to go to church. We're going to do that. I'm on board, whatever, baby. Let's just get out of jail. And so he went to Buffalo Valley, which I know there's some Buffalo Valley places here. He went to Buffalo Valley Halfway House in Gallatin, went through the treatment center, and then went to Gallatin. And I went to the Discipleship House in Mount Pleasant. So the Discipleship House is a transitional house in Mount Pleasant, and I spent 6 months there. My husband spent 9 months in his halfway house, and then remember I said I grew up in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. So the last place I really wanted to go back to was Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. The last church I wanted to walk into was Little First United Methodist Church, where my Sunday school teachers were still teaching Sunday school. But that's where God placed me. I tried to get into Buffalo Valley. I wanted away. I wanted to go away and do something different. But God knew what I needed. God knew where I needed to be, and he placed me right in the middle of where I grew up, in my little transitional house, right, half a mile from my old church that I'd always went to as a child. And that's where I went back to. Probably one of the hardest days of my life, walking back through those doors into that church. But they loved me. They loved me with God's love. They accepted me. They filled needs that I had before I even spoke the needs into existence, because God was with me. And I became very, very involved. It's an all in. When we say we surrender, we can't just surrender a little bit. It's an all in. We give our whole life. So I went back to that church, and they didn't have a youth group. And I said, well, I want a youth group, because my kids were placed with my mom and dad. And then my oldest son, he was with his dad. And my oldest son's father said, you will never see this child again without supervision. Never in your life will you see this child again without supervision. And, I thought it might be true. I didn't know. And I had to surrender my kids to God and to say, and I said to myself, whatever you choose, Lord, I know it's what's best for those kids. I wanted them back, don't get me wrong, but I had to trust that God knew what was best for me and my family. And if it meant them staying with my brother and sister-in-law and dealing with his dad, then I just had to keep following God. And I knew that in my heart. So I surrendered it all, and I just kept moving forward. And I just kept moving forward with God. And I got involved in my church, and I taught Sunday school for the youth, and I did Bible studies, and I was completely committed to doing what God wanted me to do. And my life today, I still am in awe daily of what the Lord has done in these 8 years. But I did get my kids back. They did come home. It was all a very miraculous thing. My family, it took them about 6 or 8 months after I got out of my transitional house. Me and my husband got a house in Mount Pleasant, because I had already decided, after spending 6 months in that transitional house, I wanted to help there. The lady that ran it was in her 70s, and I knew that she needed help. And no one had ever, in the 8 years that had been open at that time, had ever come back and helped after they got out. You had to be out a year. So you had to go through the program and then have a year out and then go back and help. So I was determined that I was going to be that person that in a year was going to go back and be a part of that ministry. So I moved just a few blocks away from that, and got some really crappy jobs when I got out, some really crappy jobs making minimum wage, but I just kept moving forward. And I was thankful for the jobs. I shouldn't call them crappy. They were blessings, and I'm thankful for them. Jeff Tejan out there. So I'm very thankful for the jobs that I got. But I just kept moving forward with God. And my children, after 6 months of having our own place, our kids came back home. And somebody in church gave us an old beat-up 1995 Ford Explorer. So we had a car to get the kids around in. And that was an amazing blessing. And, I went back to college. I went to school. I felt like I said, the Lord gave me the ability to go to school and to be successful in school, 20 years ago. I'm going to do it now. I'm not going to waste the potential God gave me. So I went back and I have my associate's degree now, and I'm moving forward, and I'm going to have my bachelor's. But right now I'm working to become a licensed local pastor in the Methodist Church so that I can serve our FreshStart Recovery Church in Columbia, Tennessee in whatever capacity. It is awesome, ladies, that they need me. That being a part of a recovery church is so important to me, because 12-step programs are important. But 12-step programs are designed to lead us to Christ. That is what they are designed for. Those steps are all about spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. They're all about getting your life with God, getting a relationship with Jesus Christ. That is what those steps are for. And anything short of that is not going to be helpful in healing. Everybody's got to get there their own way, and everybody's path is not the same, but that's what the steps are there for. So you see, I haven't really talked about 12 steps yet in my story. So I did at Discipleship House, I did a book called The Power to Choose, and it's a Christ-centered 12-step book, and I worked through that. So I worked my 12 steps while I was in my transitional house. But I met a lady and doing my youth ministry named Angie Trimmer. And I have a little video on YouTube. It's called Cynthia, God's Story, one word. And it's my story in 3.5 minutes. Y'all probably wish I'd played it tonight instead of all this talking. But it's a short snippet of my life, my recovery story, and my God story. So we were at a youth event that our conference put on. There's about 500 kids there, and they played this video. Well, Angie Trimmer, who is now my pastor, my mentor, my ministry partner, and my best friend, saw that video, and she had her children hunt me down and said, I want to meet that lady, because she had a dream and a vision of a recovery church in Columbia, Tennessee. And she said, I felt, when I was watching that video, I want to know, where do you live? And I said, well, I live in Mount Pleasant. She's like, that's perfect. I drive through there every day. So we started having lunch, and we became really good friends. And about a year later, she came to my job, and she said, I think I have a job offer for you. She said, I think they're going to give me money to do this. Our conference of our church, I think we're going to get a grant to move forward in this ministry. And she said, I want you to be my partner. And so that was an amazing day. And I thought, Lord, am I dedicated? Am I self-motivated? And can I do this? And the Lord just kept saying, just keep moving forward. And it has been the most beautiful journey. We've been doing this for 2.5 years, and we started with ministry in Murray County Jail. So I got to go back to the jail that I was incarcerated in and minister to friends, people I was in jail with, and strangers, of course, in that setting where I could show them there is hope in this place, and life can be different. So we did a program called Celebrate Recovery, which is my heart, because it is the 12-step program where you can say, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, and that's where the healing comes from. Because I never felt at home in a room where I had to say my higher power. It just bugged me. And plus, everything I had to say about recovery was about Jesus. God had changed my life. Jesus had come into my heart and changed me. So it was very hard for me to separate those stories. Now, I love NA, AA, recovery is good and useful and wonderful. But I found this program, and it was the program for me because I could talk about Jesus. That was what I wanted to do. So we started doing Celebrate Recovery in Murray County Jail. We have a Celebrate Recovery every Friday night in Columbia at Craft Memorial. which is also the host church for our Fresh Start Recovery Church on Hatcher Lane in Columbia. We do Celebrate Recovery on Friday nights. We have Recovery Church on Sunday nights. Recovery Church starts at 5. Celebrate Recovery starts at 6. They both start with a meal. Y'all start with a meal. We all like to eat. It's a good thing. It brings us all together, you know. And it brings us all together. And everything we do is kid friendly. We have children. We have a nursery, elementary, and teen programming at Celebrate Recovery. We have it at our church service too. Well, let me say, we don't have any small groups at our church service. Let me back up. We're going to start in March, our small groups. So right now we're just doing meal church, and they take the kids out for children's church after worship. But when we do CR or any other event at Fresh Start, we always make them family friendly. And Celebrate Recovery is also not just about drugs and alcohol. It is any hurt, habit, or hang up that keeps you from being your best self. And that includes codependency, anger, fear, just all of the things that keep us from living out our best life. So it's a program where you can bring your family members. You can bring family members that aren't addicts, and they can come and be a part of a codependency group or a life struggles group. So it's a type of recovery, 12-step, because we all need recovery. We're all recovering for something. There's two types of people in recovery: people that know they need recovery, and people that need recovery but don't know they need it. And that, because it's for all of us. And our walk with Jesus it goes hand in hand with those 12 steps. It does. Those steps are created to bring us in relationship with God, to help us live and love people and love ourselves. And so, I want anybody who's struggling and wondering how am I going to fix this? There's so much that's broken. It'll never be fixed. It'll never be right. Again, my life will never be what it could have been. I am firmly convinced that my life is better than it ever could have been any other way, because I have been given a story that I can share with people, to share God's love with them. If I would have just woke up one day and quit using and started working and got my life together, I would not love the Lord like I do today. And that is what brings my life joy, peace. It has changed my parents' lives. It has changed my husband's life. It's changed my brother and sister-in-law's life. The life change and what God's done in my life, it has affected everyone in my family, just like our addiction affects all of the people around us. The love of God that we can bring, the transformation that we can show, can change the lives of people around us. Thank y'all for letting me share. You have a beautiful church here and beautiful worship, and it was an honor to be here. Thank you.
The wonderful thing about Jesus Christ is he is more powerful than anything that we deal with in life. There's nothing that we come up against if we are living our lives for Christ that we can't overcome. Without him, we may try, we may be semi-successful, but we will never be totally successful without the power of the blood of Jesus Christ. Amen. Wonderful story, sister. Thank you so much. Well, God bless y'all. Give somebody a hug and tell them you love them before you leave. But if you are new and your counselor has emailed Patty, the closet is right over here. Go get you some clothes, okay? God bless y'all. See y'all Sunday.